Last time, a simple piece of coal became the ultimate bargaining chip as Yuquan masterfully played the tribal chiefs. He dangled the secrets of iron smelting, then swiftly pivoted from a hostile takeover to a golden invitation. Join the Han tribe and get rich together. Meanwhile, Supreme Leader Luo Chong, escaping his Hellion children under the guise of an inspection, stumbled upon the Han tribe's own Silicon Valley. It's here he discovers a boy genius, Yang Dashan, who has secretly invented a revolutionary rice transplanter. Just as news arrives from the south of a newly found coal mine and the miraculous potato, a new crisis looms. The Northern War requires feeding 50,000 people for a year. Luo Chong's solution? A breathtakingly audacious plan to build a mechanized state farm. He personally recruits Yang Dashan and marches to his Power Research Institute, dropping an impossible order: build an army of steam tractors before spring. As Yang Dashan stares, jaw agape, at a workshop filled with steel behemoths, the tech team realizes their reward for genius is a future of glorious, soul-crushing overtime. Of course, Luo Chong was only responsible for the ideas. He wouldn't be lifting a finger himself. The test was a resounding success. But the head of the agricultural machinery team and Yang Dashan, after putting their heads together, still felt uneasy. Fake seedlings were, after all, fake. What if something went wrong when they used real ones? Wouldn't all the transplanters that had already been mass-produced become scrap iron? No one could bear that responsibility. The two of them conferred and, bracing themselves, went to find Luo Chong. Test it with real seedlings in the spring. Luo Chong rubbed his chin. It was indeed a problem. But if they waited until spring, the plan for widespread adoption would be dead in the water. He thought for a moment and said, "How about this? We won't assemble the final machines yet, but we can start manufacturing the parts. Gears, chains, skids, steel pipes. Even if we need to make minor adjustments later, it won't have a major impact on these components, right?" Their eyes lit up at his words. That was it. That's a great idea, Yang Dashan said excitedly. That way, we can still get them rolled out before the planting season. The team leader nodded repeatedly. No problem. But for the gears and chains, we'll still need someone from the General Research Institute to guide us. We don't have the expertise for that. A minor detail. Luo Chong approved it on the spot, giving it the green light with a wave of his hand. No sooner had the transplanter issue been settled than Lin Fei got busy on his end. He led a team, burning the midnight oil, and held a production mobilization meeting. The mission was clear: deliver 20 tractors before the new year. He broke down the entire production plan to the very last screw. Every detail was laid out with perfect clarity. Which team, how many people, how many days, how many parts to produce, and which machine tool to use. The more they studied the plan, the more confident they became. They realized that this seemingly impossible task, when broken down and tackled systematically, wasn't so difficult after all. A switch flipped in the minds of everyone at the meeting, researchers and technical workers alike, as if the door to a new world had been thrown open. So this was how modern manufacturing worked. The next day, Lin Fei, sporting 2 dark circles under his eyes, went to find Luo Chong. It wasn't about anything else, just one word: people. He started crying poor, demanding people, a large number of skilled technical workers. Luo Chong had fully expected this and approved it on the spot. 70% of the graduates from all the schools in the Han tribe would be assigned to his Power Research Institute. Still not satisfied, Lin Fei shamelessly set his sights on the batch of cannibal slaves from the north. His plan was simple: use the slaves for mining, thus freeing up the original miners to be sent to the factories as apprentices, building up a talent reserve for the future great troop surge. Voiceover. From a king of clever tricks to a master of resource allocation, planning from behind the scenes, Luo Chong switches roles with ease. And Lin Fei, too, has evolved from a pure tech geek into an excellent manager who understands how to exploit, make rational use of resources. As for the graduates about to enter the workforce, they had no idea that what awaited them was the ultimate test, named the wave of industrialization. Lin Fei, with a shameless expression that screamed, "I'm doing this for the tribe," began to lay out his plan to borrow a chicken to lay an egg. "Leader, hear me out. Lend me these slaves. I'll use them to replace the miners, and then I'll train the freed-up miners to become skilled technicians." He grew more animated as he spoke, his words tumbling out in a rush of excitement. "Once we have a surplus of workers, won't the excavators, loaders, and dump trucks start rolling off the assembly line? When that time comes, forget Xingang County. Every mine in the Han tribe will be mechanized. We'll need manual labor then. And this batch of slaves, I'll return them to you, good as new." Luo Chong stroked his chin, the abacus in his mind clattering away. The logic was sound. In his eyes, this batch of cannibal slaves was little more than an expendable resource, with only two real purposes. 1. To work until they dropped dead, and 2. To be sent to the medical college as test subjects before they died, contributing to the advancement of medicine. As for human rights, a future for their people? Not a chance. Luo Chong wanted them to vanish from this world completely. That being the case, lending them to Lin Fei for a few months was no great loss. The imperial palace could wait, and he was in no rush to become emperor. Fine. Approved. Luo Chong agreed with a wave of his hand. With the people problem solved, Lin Fei pulled a small booklet from his coat and presented it like a precious treasure. Leader, this is the parts order for the General Research Institute. High-pressure oil pipes, rubber tires, window glass, carbide lamps. All these high-precision components are beyond our second institute's capabilities. We're relying on them. You have to get this to them right away, otherwise my goal of 20 vehicles will be nothing but a pipe dream. Luo Chong flipped through it. The parameters, quantities, and delivery dates were all listed with perfect clarity. Got it, he nodded. Anything else? That's all. I guarantee the mission will be completed. Lin Fei gave a smart salute, like a general fresh from a great victory. Good. Then I'm off. That same day, Luo Chong took Yang Dashan and boarded a train to Weishan County. Riding a train for the first time, Yang Dashan was as excited as a child, his eyes wide with wonder. The thought that he, too, would one day help develop these iron beasts warmed his heart like a small furnace. The next day, the two parted ways. Luo Chong took a boat to the General Research Institute on Huxin Island to coordinate the production tasks. Yang Dashan, meanwhile, boarded a cargo ship back to his hometown in Luoyang County to prepare for his family's move. A few days later, Luo Chong arrived in Luoyang County and, together with Governor Xi Xian, inspected the newly planned 60,000 mu experimental field. The sheer scale of it was staggering. 10 kilometers wide and 36 kilometers long. It would take a team of horses galloping in relay to circle it without collapsing from exhaustion. Luo Chong surveyed the area and issued 2 new orders. Organize a team to clear all the trees in this area. Burn all the shrubs and weeds. Then, build me a supersized grain drying ground, complete with a garage, dormitories, and a maintenance workshop. I want it fully equipped. Luo Chong decided to place these supporting facilities under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Agriculture. The Han tribe's Ministry of Agriculture was currently just a fledgling organization with only about a dozen people. The man in charge was a skilled farmer named Jiang Er. Upon returning, Luo Chong immediately summoned Jiang Er, told him about the experimental field, and formally appointed him to oversee the project. When Jiang Er heard there were machines that could plow land automatically, his eyes lit up. He immediately volunteered to lead a team to the Research Institute in Xin'an County for a study tour. Luo Chong considered it. It was a good idea. How could one manage an experimental farm without understanding the machinery? He approved the request. And with that, the reclamation of the experimental field, the research and development of agricultural machinery, and the training of drivers were all set in motion in an orderly fashion. The plan to provide a year's worth of rations for 50,000 people in the north had been transformed from a grand objective into a series of concrete, achievable tasks. Voiceover, from borrowing slaves to placing orders. Lin Fei has demonstrated the essential qualities of an excellent project manager, exploiting every available resource. And Luo Chong, like a masterful chess player, has arranged the personnel, resources, and tasks on the giant chessboard of the Han tribe with perfect order. As for our comrade Jiang Er, he is about to lead his fledgling team from being a theoretical research department to a hands-on, down-in-the-dirt task force. The gears of the agricultural revolution have begun to turn. After a moment's thought, Luo Chong dipped his brush in ink and, with a flurry of strokes, penned a letter to Yu Yi and Chu Bing, who were far away on the northern frontier. In the letter, he first fussed over them like a mother hen, asking how the fighting was going and whether they were still in one piece. Then, his tone shifted as he beat his chest and promised, next year's grain supply is guaranteed to be more than enough. You just focus on fighting, and don't you worry about going hungry. He even added a postscript. Whatever you need, just say the word. The moment the rivers thaw this spring, I, your big brother, guarantee I'll have the supplies delivered to you as swiftly as a bird in flight. As soon as the letter was finished, Luo Chong immediately summoned a guard. Swoosh, a magnificent falcon, carrying his personal letter, soared into the sky and vanished over the horizon. The journey of several thousand miles would likely take the feathered messenger 2 or 3 days. Meanwhile, the north was already in the dead of winter, a time when dripping water froze in an instant and every breath turned to frost. It was the beginning of the 11th month of the Daming calendar. The 8 commanderies of Hanyang had a 4-month winter, of which only one had passed. But the 3 major northern encampments had to endure a brutal 6-month winter. Having survived only 2 months, they still had 4 long months of ice and snow ahead of them. The first 3 months of winter were when the snow fell most ferociously. Back when Chu Bing had first arrived, the heavens had already graced them with 2 heavy snowfalls. Within the past month, it had generously added 2 more goose-feather blizzards to the tally. Russell, 4 consecutive blizzards, each deep enough to bury a man, combined with the ghost-like harassment from the Shinsguard, had finally pushed the cannibal tribes in the forest to their breaking point. The result was a single word: starvation. The hunting parties they sent out vanished as if into thin air, leaving no trace. The tribes had hoped for them to return with mountains of game. Now, the entire population could only huddle in their villages, shivering and listening to their rumbling stomachs, hollow with hunger. To make matters worse, the salt pond they relied on for survival had been seized by the Han tribe. They sent men to reclaim it, but those teams vanished even more completely than the hunters, utterly annihilated. The old, the weak, and the sick, driven by unbearable hunger, ventured out to dig for roots and bark, but they too, as if bewitched, never returned. Left with no choice, the starving cannibals had to keep sending people out. With their villages stripped of strong hunters, they sent women, elders, and children to check the traps in the forest. If they were lucky enough to find a snared rabbit or 2, they could thank their ancestors and survive for a few more days. If the traps were empty, the village's remaining inhabitants had no choice but to risk it all, venturing to the great river outside the forest to break the ice and fish. The timid ones, who didn't dare go to the wide-open river bend, ironically saved their own lives. But those from larger villages, believing there was safety in numbers, charged boisterously towards the great river bend. The result, they were immediately wiped out in one fell swoop by the Shinsguard's 3rd Battalion. Some villages still had a fair number of able-bodied men left. With a hardening of their hearts and a glint of red in their eyes, they turned their blades on their neighbors. After feasting on the weak from the next village and replenishing their strength, these cannibals would wipe their mouths and form new parties to march toward the eastern hunting grounds. Nearly every reaction from the enemy fell perfectly in line with Chu Bing's script. The only slight surprise was that the cannibals seemed to have given up on the salt pond. The defending 2nd Battalion hadn't seen a single attacker in over half a month. In the beginning, they had cleanly dispatched an attacking force of over 1,000. Half a month later, they had easily wiped out another team of 700 or 800. Perhaps they had finally been beaten into submission. With even their giant apes ending up as casualties, the cannibals seemed to finally understand that the salt pond was a prize they couldn't touch. Consequently, for the past half-month, the soldiers of the 2nd Battalion were so idle they were about to start planting cabbages on their fortifications. Aside from a dozen or so waves of giant apes that charged in like zealots, hell-bent on throwing their lives away, they had seen no other large enemy forces. The giant apes were also strange. They always came in small groups of a dozen, or sometimes just a few. If their goal was to take the salt pond, their numbers were laughably small. If it was for revenge, they certainly fought with that kind of frenzy. If you had to ask who was busiest lately, it was the 3rd Battalion guarding the riverbed. With the cannibal hunting parties unable to return, the villages were out of food. The people coming out to fish arrived in a seemingly endless stream, wave after wave. In just 1 month, the 3rd Battalion had annihilated over 20 fishing parties of various sizes. The smallest had 30 or so people, the largest over 100. All told, they had taken more than 1,200 prisoners. Notably, in the more recent encounters, the proportion of female prisoners had risen significantly. It seemed Chu Bing's strategy of cutting off their lifeline was proving truly effective. The enemy was now so starved that even their women had to risk their lives for food. Of course, the undisputed champion of spoils had to be the 1st Battalion, the main offensive force in the hunting grounds. The 1st Battalion's achievements weren't just counted in heads, but also in mountains of wild game. To cooperate with Chu Bing's plan for, regionally focused economic development, and to compete with the cannibals for food, the 700 soldiers of the 1st Battalion, plus 1,000 hunter militiamen, had become tireless engines of the hunt, roaming the grounds day and night. If they encountered a cannibal hunting party, they engaged and destroyed it without question. If they didn't, there was no shame in hunting. In the past month, the 1st Battalion, under Chu Bing's direct command, had taken down another 4 large cannibal hunting parties, each with over 200 men. At the same time, they took the opportunity to round up dozens of herds of wild animals, mainly yaks, wild asses, alpacas, and the dim-witted great-horned deer. These animals were the future stars of the North's livestock industry, so they caught as many as they could. Thus, a peculiar scene unfolded on the battlefield. After more than a month of campaigning, the 1st Battalion had captured a total of about 1,800 prisoners. But the number of various wild animals they had captured had already surpassed 3,000. Heavens! They had captured more livestock than prisoners. This situation, in turn, created a curious chemical reaction. The more game the Han tribe captured, the harder it was for the cannibals to hunt. The hungrier they became, the weaker their fighting ability grew. As a result, whenever they encountered the Han tribe again, their resistance was practically non-existent. In general, the more cattle and sheep the Han tribe captured, the greater their advantage became. By now, the 3 battalions of the Shin's Guard had become seasoned veterans, and Chu Bing was happy to take a step back, no longer needing to micromanage every detail. He commanded remotely from the main camp in the hunting grounds, accompanied by his personal guard platoon. The 3 companies of the 1st Battalion, each leading several hundred militiamen, were sent out to sweep the entire hunting grounds. So far, the combined forces had captured 4,300 prisoners and killed at least 1,000 or 2,000. Nearly 6,000 of the enemy's fighting force had been eliminated. Time flew, and soon it was the beginning of the 11th month. According to insider information from Yu Yi, the cannibals' main hunting season was concentrated in the first 3 months of winter. 2 months had now passed, leaving only 1. Chu Bing estimated that in the coming month, the enemy would descend into a final frenzy, and the pressure on the 1st Battalion would likely be immense. Yu Yi had also mentioned a pattern among the beast herds in these hunting grounds. For the first 3 months, they grazed here. After that, when the grass was mostly eaten, they would collectively migrate south. Of course, if the snow was too heavy and buried all the grass, they would leave earlier. But this year was different. Because the Han tribe had sheltered a large number of the herds in advance, the rate of fodder consumption in the hunting grounds had slowed dramatically. As long as there were no more cataclysmic blizzards, the remaining grass was enough for the herds to graze on for another month. If the herds didn't leave, the cannibals would have to come out and hunt. This way, the first phase of Chu Bing's strategy could achieve even more brilliant results. However, he still had a nagging worry, a key question he couldn't figure out. One day, he went to find Yu Yi. "Uncle Yu, give it to me straight. What are the true numbers of these cannibals? We've taken out nearly 6,000 of them, one way or another. How many are left? How many able-bodied men can they still muster?" Hearing this, Yu Yi threw up his hands with a look that said, "You've stumped me. My dear nephew, that's something I really can't say. I've been here for years, but I wouldn't dare march into their heartland to conduct a census. You ask me how many they have. I reckon they don't even know themselves. Those folks are a chaotic mess. Who could possibly count them all?" Chu Bing's brow furrowed, and he sat there, stewing in frustration. To not even know the enemy's total strength. This was an incredibly frustrating way to fight a war. It wasn't that he was afraid, but when would this endless guerrilla warfare ever end? The enemy was a scattered mob, without a single leader who could step forward and challenge him to a decisive battle. This was deeply unsatisfying. He wanted a decisive battle, but the enemy wouldn't give him the chance. This was completely different from fighting an organized and disciplined opponent like the Xian tribe. It felt less like a war and more like a massive hunt. Seeing his troubled expression, Yu Yi patted his shoulder and consoled him. "All right, don't worry yourself over it. Things are going smoothly, aren't they? Everything is according to your plan. Once we've worn down their strength to the point where they can't send anyone out, won't it be our turn to take the offensive?" He paused, pointing at the map to analyze the situation. Based on how things are going, the fighting in these hunting grounds will last at most another 2 months. After that, they'll have to pull back and prepare to move south. What we need to do in these next 2 months is to knock out as many of their hunting parties as possible. Then, we can move to a new location and continue to deal with them. Narrators aside, talk about taking competition to the extreme. For a bite to eat, the cannibals have started eating the old man next door. Meanwhile, Chu Bing has managed to turn a brutal war of extermination into the first northern grand wildlife capture and breeding event. With more livestock captured than prisoners, if he wrote that in a report, even Luo Chong would have to wonder if he'd send a hunting party instead of an army. Chu Bing, don't ask. The answer is, we're developing animal husbandry, and this war is just the beginning. I'm not afraid of the war itself, Chu Bing said, rubbing his hands together as the white mist of his breath instantly turned to frost. I'm afraid the chieftain can't wait. In this godforsaken weather, if we can't crack this tough nut this winter and it drags into next year, the entire North spring planting will be ruined. When that happens, We'll all be starving. We can't expect the tribe to just keep sending us grain, can we? Just then, thump, thump, thump. The tent flap was thrown open, and a guard, covered in wind and snow, burst in, holding a bamboo tube high in his hand. Report, Commander. A falcon message from the chieftain. It just arrived at the River Valley camp and was sent over by express horse. Where is it? Give it to me. Hearing it was a letter from Luo Chong, Chu being shot to his feet as if jolted by electricity. The soldier quickly handed over the bamboo tube. Chu Bing snatched it, broke the seal with a click, and pulled out the letter, his eyes flying across the page. The next second, his tense shoulders slumped, and he let out a long, heavy breath. The heart that had been lodged in his throat dropped back into his belly with a thud. Uncle Yu, look. He passed the letter to Yu Yi, his face clearing like a sky after a storm. The chieftain has spoken. He told us not to worry about grain and to focus on the fight. New supplies will arrive in the spring. Our food for next year is secure. Yu Yi read through it in a flash, and a great weight lifted from his heart. Good. It's good the grain issue is solved. He pointed at the letter. The chieftain also wants a report on the battle situation. Write a reply quickly. Oh, and send a few of those battlefield photos you took. Let the old man see them for himself. Put his mind at ease. Right? I almost forgot if you hadn't mentioned it. Chu Bing slapped his forehead. Fighting out in the wilds all day, even my battle reports are delayed. Reporting to the chieftain must be even slower. Looks like I'll have to be more diligent from now on. Update my feed daily. He got to it immediately. He had brought a precious treasure on this expedition, several cameras, one for each battalion. Although developing the photos required sending the film back to the darkroom at the River Valley camp, the previous convoys transporting prisoners and ammunition had already brought back the first batch of results. Chu Bing immediately spread out a sheet of paper and, with a flourish of his brush, wrote a long and detailed account of the recent battles. He then selected a dozen of the most representative photos, scribbled notes on the back of each, stuffed them all into the bamboo tube, sealed it with wax, and called for a messenger. Express. Deliver this back to the chieftain. 2 days later, Luo Chong received the weighty reply. As he unrolled the letter, several black and white photographs slid out with a rustle. He picked up the photos first, looking at them one by one, a smile spreading wider and wider across his face. The first was of the salt pond position. Dozens of giant ape corpses were piled up like small hills in front of the fortifications. The soldiers stood beside them, chests puffed out, holding their rifles, their faces screaming, "I'm the baddest man on the planet." The dense clusters of bloody holes on the apes' bodies were clearly the handiwork of shotguns. There was no faking that. The second set was from the hunting grounds camp. The 3 companies of the 1st Battalion were escorting 3 long lines of prisoners who looked like human shish kebabs. The captives were dressed in a savage, primitive manner, unmistakably cannibals. In the background of the photo were herds of yaks, wild asses, great horned deer, and alpacas, looking for all the world like a grand opening sale at a wildlife park. The final set was from the prisoner of war camp at the River Valley camp. The photo was a stunning group shot of over 4,000 prisoners crammed together in a dense, dark mass. They stood in the vast, snow-covered landscape, surrounded by a ring of soldiers with loaded guns, like a pack of wolves watching a sheep pen. The visual impact was off the charts. This camera is truly a marvel, Luo Chong marveled. Back in the day, reporting military achievements required delivering severed heads, a bloody and environmentally unfriendly practice. Now, with a simple click, achievements, prisoners, and KPIs were all taken care of. It was ridiculously convenient. Someone, he called, slapping the battle report down on his desk. Here, a guard outside the door responded immediately. Copy this report and these photos. Reprint them. Spread them throughout the entire tribe. Let the common folk in every commandery and county see for themselves just how incredible our soldiers are. As you command. This was a perfect opportunity to fire up the populace. They needed to know just how strong the Han tribe's fist was. National pride was something that had to be hammered out, bit by bit, through one victorious foreign war after another. He needed everyone to feel proud to be a member of the Han tribe. Only then would they stand tall, chests out, and roar with pride. We are Han. After the guard left, Luo Chong's thoughts drifted to more distant horizons. He picked up a pen and jotted down in his memo. After spring, photograph the trains and farming machinery for a nationwide exhibition tour. Finished, he leaned back in his chair and began to sketch out the grand blueprint for the entire Han tribe in his mind. The Northern War was proceeding smoothly. It could be settled by next year. The grain supply was also arranged, completely foolproof. His gaze shifted to the map on his desk. On the map, Two iron dragons were already thundering between Sinwei and Weishan. Another dedicated coal transport line, like a black artery, continuously pumped coal from Pingyao County to Dongxing Commandery. The northern mineral transport railways were basically complete. Next, the south. His finger landed heavily on a blank area on the map, the future capital city. The Jingtuo line. This railway, running from Tuahai Commandery to the capital, would be the new city's lifeline, the umbilical cord supplying its blood. The imperial palace, city walls, residential buildings, countless tons of steel and cement, steam-powered mixers, and white marble would be transported along this railway, building a great city from nothing. And once the capital was built, this line would transform into an economic expressway, forever bustling with activity. Then, there was the Tang territory. Luo Chong's finger traced a long, winding line across the map, like a giant python about to awaken. The Pantang line. This line would start from the mines in Panchir Commandery and, like stringing beads, connect the iron-producing Taigang Commandery, the water-rich Gongquan Commandery, the rubber-rich Longxi Commandery, and the major grain-producing Jinpu Commandery, linking them all in one go. It would be a hassle, to be sure, but once completed, the full potential of the entire Tang territory would be unleashed. To get rich, you must first build roads. Grain, rubber, manganese steel. All these treasures the Han tribe desperately needed would gallop joyfully on the back of this steel python. And this was only the first phase. In the future, this railway would extend to Haizhou Commandery and Ningbo Commandery, allowing the inland to embrace the ocean. It would also run north from Taigang Commandery, straight to that newly discovered coal mine. Finally, there was his most audacious idea, Cheongzhou Island. He would build a railway there, running from east to west, and then cross the strait. An unprecedented cross-sea bridge, like a steel rainbow, would lock Cheongzhou Island firmly to the mainland. This railway would be longer than all the previous ones combined, but he was willing to spend a lifetime to complete it. As long as this railway existed, Cheongzhou Island would never be able to break away from the mainland. Narrators aside, high-level alert. The protagonist's classic infrastructure maniac mode has been activated. What is war? War is just a prerequisite for better infrastructure projects. While Chu Bing is playing Call of Duty on the front lines, Luo Chong is back home playing SimCity, Railroad Tycoon Edition. The PowerPoint presentation in his head is more detailed than a Fortune 500 company's annual plan. The cannibals, we're still worried about our next meal, and our opponent is already planning a century of national policy. How are we supposed to fight this? But this was far from the end. Luo Chong's gaze traveled beyond the vast lake, toward the even more expansive grasslands to the north. Once the cannibals were dealt with and the Han tribe had 2 or 3 years to recover, he would bring the entire western shore of the Great Lake under his control. He would not permit any hidden dangers to remain behind his capital. As for the grasslands themselves, that would depend on whether there were any treasures worth his attention buried beneath the western soil. Of course, when it came to land, who would ever complain about having too much? Just like that desert in the Middle East. In ancient times, it was a place of little value, but now it was the subject of bloody conflict. Who knew what future oil lay buried beneath this seemingly barren land? In a few decades, when the Han tribe's population exploded to several million, or even tens of millions, Luo Chong would not hesitate to push the borders of his territory westward, all the way to the very edge of the grasslands. Having reviewed the project progress in all regions and confirmed that everything was on track, Luo Chong's attention returned to the construction of the capital city. At the beginning of the year, he had sent Yu Ji, the commander of the Imperial Guard, to act as the foreman in charge of building the new capital. Though it was called building a capital, for now, it was really just the construction of the Imperial Palace. It couldn't be helped. The capital was too large. He had to prioritize his own home. Luo Chong had spared no expense on this palace. The main structure was modeled after the grand and majestic Daming Palace of the Tang Dynasty, while the rear garden incorporated the blended Chinese and Western style of the old summer palace, offering a new vista with every step. One in the front, one in the back, one public, one private. The imperial court and the private residence were perfectly separated. Built right the first time, it was guaranteed not to go out of style for centuries. However, the vision was grand, but the reality was grim. Under Yu Ji's command, besides his small contingent of imperial guards, there were only about 3,000 cannibal slaves. They were engaged in the most primitive of tasks, digging earth and laying foundations. How did they dig? They dug a giant pit in the planned rear garden. The excavated earth was then transported, cart by cart, to the front to raise the foundations of the palace halls. Once the earth was dug out, water would be diverted in, and the rear garden would naturally become a sparkling, man-made lake. The plan was perfect, but the progress was agonizingly slow. The workers used the most primitive iron shovels, digging one spadeful at a time. Then, using wheelbarrows, ox carts, and horse-drawn carts, they would grunt and groan as they transported the earth. Upon arrival, they would grunt and groan again as they pushed the earth onto the 10-meter-high platforms, finally tamping it down firmly with manual labor. The foundation of the Hanyuan Hall alone was 15 meters high, 200 meters long, and 100 meters wide. 300,000 cubic meters of rammed earth. And this was just for one hall. After this came the Xianzheng Hall, the Zichen Hall, and dozens of side halls and pavilions. In a recent letter from Yuji, every line was steeped in despair. They hadn't even finished the foundations for the 3 main halls. The sheer scale of the work was a modern-day version of the foolish old man who moved mountains. Reading the letter, Luo Chong felt a bit embarrassed. After all, he was building a mansion for his own family, and the sheer scale of the undertaking felt a little self-indulgent. Although he hadn't conscripted any citizens, relying mainly on slaves and a small number of craftsmen, the project was simply too immense to be managed otherwise. He could only pick up his pen and write a reply to Yuji, painting a grand picture. Brother, hold steady. Don't panic. The tribe's latest construction machinery will be in place soon. More slaves are also being packaged and sent your way. Next year, come spring next year, I guarantee you'll feel like you're flying. After placating the foreman, Luo Chong himself was not actually in a hurry. The Han tribe was blossoming on all fronts, and he couldn't let his home renovations delay the entire tribe's progress toward prosperity. Since there wasn't much of importance going on, he decided to work on some soft power development. To put it plainly, cultural development. The biggest weakness of the Han tribe right now was its lack of culture. You could count the number of books in the entire tribe on your fingers and toes. The laws of Han, the rites of Han, selected poems, elementary arithmetic, intermediate arithmetic, nature. That was it. These few books were their entire literary collection. The medical school was in the process of compiling textbooks, anatomy, a crash course in the compendium of Materia Medica, and a guide to maternal and child health care. But after more than 2 years of work, they had yet to be officially published. No, he couldn't wait any longer. Luo Chong made a sweeping gesture with his pen. The medical school textbooks are to be finalized immediately. Print them in bulk. Open enrollment. He wanted to set a good precedent for medicine in this world, to establish some rules. But even with the addition of these medical books, the number of books in the Han tribe was still pitifully small. For a tribe on the verge of becoming an empire to have such a thin cultural foundation was frankly embarrassing. And to make matters worse, most of the books were simple primers written by him, the chieftain, which was even more absurd. He had to find a way to get the people of this world to pick up their own pens and write their own classics. Thus, an earth-shattering decision was born. In the middle of the 11th month of the first year of the Daming calendar, an unprecedented order was issued from Luo Chong's study, quickly spreading to every corner of the Han tribe. The Han tribe's first National Creative Writing 101 contest was officially launched. The barrier to entry was ridiculously low. As long as you could write, you could participate. The official documents sent out to the various regions were written in a flowery and enticing style. To enrich the cultural treasury of our great Han, we are now soliciting articles, letters, and books from the entire tribe. No restrictions on genre. No restrictions on content. No restrictions on subject matter. Write whatever you want to write. All submissions will be personally reviewed by this chieftain. Once selected, payment will start at 5 yuan, with no upper limit. Outstanding works will be permanently collected by the Han tribe library, and the authors may be directly ennobled. There's even a chance to become an official. To prevent people from lacking inspiration, the document thoughtfully included a list of topic suggestions. 1. Travelogues. Write about what you see on your adventures. Whether you're migrating, on a business trip, or traveling for pleasure, write down the local customs, strange climates, and bizarre animals you encounter in the form of a diary, log, or adventure story. 2. Observation reports. Write about the little things around you. The stars in the sky, the ants on the ground, the pigs at home. What are you thinking when you observe them? What are their characteristics? Are there any patterns? Share your thoughts with the chieftain in words or drawings. 3. Work experience. Write about your job. Whether you're a farmer, a miner, a blacksmith, or a low-level civil servant, write down the little tricks, troubles, and stories from your work. Your experience might just change the entire tribe. 4. Personal suggestions, aka the roast. Write about your complaints. What's bothering you in life? What do you think is unreasonable? Do you have any good suggestions? Write them down boldly. Let the chieftain know your difficulties, and maybe your suggestion will become the tribe's new policy tomorrow. Narrators aside, the cultural desert is in desperate need of irrigation, and Chieftain Luo is forced to usher in the era of national wordsmithing. While other leaders are busy figuring out how to wage war, he's figuring out how to get people to write more. This move leaps directly from material civilization to spiritual civilization, putting him at least 500 years ahead of his time. The common folk of the tribe are probably baffled by the official notice. What? I can become an official by writing a diary? That observation notebook I have, detailing how many times my neighbor's dog poops in a day? Can I submit that? 5. Aspirations and ideals. What is your dream? Perhaps you wish to become a doctor, to heal the wounded and revive the dying. Perhaps you wish to be a good official, bringing prosperity to a region and letting the people live in peace. Or maybe, you wish to be a captain, steering a great ship to explore the ends of the world. Or a teacher, to enlighten minds and educate the people. Or even, you wish to grow a pair of wings and, like a bird, see how high the sky is and how vast the earth. Write down these wild ideas, your plans, your efforts, and share them with the chieftain. 6. Social philosophy, 100 schools of thought. A soldier thinks about how to be victorious in every battle. A farmer thinks about how to achieve a bountiful harvest. A craftsman thinks about how to build more ingenious machinery and ships. What about you? What unique insights do you have about this world? Why not write them into a book, spread them far and wide, and find your kindred spirits? Swish, swish, swish. Luo Chong wrote pages and pages of notices, wishing he could cram in every idea he could think of, all to ignite the spark of this national creative writing movement. When the notices were sent out, some officials in Hanyang Commandery still thought it a frivolous endeavor. Chieftain, look at this, travelogues, personal ideals. What's the use of any of this? It has nothing to do with technological inheritance or knowledge reserves. Luo Chong simply smiled at their words. Who said travelogues were useless? Wasn't Confucius's Analects a piece of nonfiction written by his students about his travels through the states giving lectures? Who would dare say it wasn't a classic? Whether something was a classic or not wasn't defined by any single person. As long as someone could summarize their thoughts and ideas in writing, that person was by no means mediocre. What Luo Chong wanted to do was to collect all these sparks of wisdom scattered among the common people, discard the dross, keep the essence, and then compile them into books, letting the fire spread across the plains. Moreover, those prompts about ideas he had given. What if they really did give birth to this world's 100 schools of thought? Having ideas was a good thing. Having wrong ideas was also a good thing. Good ideas should be spread throughout the world. As for those heretical ideas that were not conducive to rule, it was the perfect opportunity to snuff them out while they were still a small flame. The notices for the writing contest flew like snowflakes to every corner of the Han tribe. At first, the local officials were rather dismissive. What a pointless endeavor. There are so few literate people in the tribe, and most of them are our own. What kind of splash can this event possibly make? However, reality gave them a resounding slap in the face. Luo Chong's writing contest was like a depth charge, setting off a monstrous wave among the common people. Yu Guang's manuscript definitely had the potential to be passed down through generations. However, as a book, the writing was still a bit raw. To print it in large quantities, he would need someone to polish it up. When the book was printed, it would certainly be sold for money. Luo Chong had no intention of paying the author's fee out of his own pocket. The project would have to fund itself. Thus, he summoned Bai Chi from the school in Hanyang Commandery. Bai Chi had always been in charge of the printing department. He was the right man for the job. Chieftain, you were looking for me? Bai Chi bowed immediately upon entering the study. Yes, Luo Chong got straight to the point. It's about the writing contest. We've received a lot of good submissions, some of which can be printed directly into books. But the manuscripts are a bit rough and need to be polished and typeset first. You'll be in charge of this. Any problem with that? No problem, but Bai Chi rubbed his hands, looking troubled. The workload might be quite heavy. The few people in the printing department won't be enough. How about we get some people from the school? The teachers are on winter break anyway. They're idle. Done. Luo Chong slapped the table. You'll be in charge of contacting them. Those who are willing to come will receive an extra salary. Count it as overtime. Yes, I'll see to it at once. Next, Luo Chong began to lay out the specific publication plan. He ordered Yu Guang's manuscript to be split in two. One part would be dedicated to introducing marine life, emphasizing the richness of its produce, to make people want to dive into the sea and grab a handful. Luo Chong even personally wrote the preface for this book, the first sentence of which was, "The ocean embraces 100 rivers. Its tolerance makes it great. Beneath the azure waves, countless treasures lie hidden." He officially named this book, A Study of the Sea. The other part consisted of Yu Guang's seafaring experiences, equivalent to a nautical log. Although it didn't have much scientific value, it would allow landlubbers to experience the feeling of riding the wind and waves to broaden their horizons. Any book that could broaden one's horizons was a good book. Luo Chong named this book, The Young Man and the Sea. With the tasks assigned, Luo Chong once again dove into the pile of manuscripts in his study. Xiao Dai and Zhan Ying, having given birth and being bored out of their minds, also came over to help screen the manuscripts and pass the time. Seeing Luo Chong so engrossed in a study of the sea, Zhan Ying felt an itch in her heart. "My husband," she sidled up to Luo Chong, batting her large eyes. "I want to write a book too, but I don't know what to write. Do you think I can do it?" Luo Chong was engrossed in a work report from a minor official into a high commandery. This guy was a natural-born detective. He had actually summarized his own set of criminal investigation theories, complete with numerous case studies he had personally handled, written like a detective novel that was impossible to put down. Hearing Zhan Ying's words, he reluctantly looked up. "You want to write a book too?" "Sure. What do you want to write about?" "I'll be your advisor." I don't know," Zhan Ying said, a little embarrassed. "I see that everyone else can write. Sister Tang Yao is even compiling books at the medical school. As her older sister, I can't fall too far behind, can I? My husband, can you help me think of something?" "What to write?" Luo Chong stroked his chin, his eyes darting around. "I've got it. Just write about what you're best at. Write a cookbook." The more he spoke, the more excited he became. The tribe is bigger now, and many of the newcomers are unfamiliar with our culinary traditions. They only know how to boil most ingredients, which is a terrible waste. There's so much potential here. You'll write a cookbook, divided into 4 sections. 1. The origin of the dish and any special significance. 2. The necessary ingredients, down to the exact weight. 3. Detailed instructions, steaming, boiling, pan frying, deep frying, step by step. The goal is one thing, to teach everyone in the land how to eat well. Narrators aside, cultural development is now in the fast lane. First, he's nurturing a marine literateur and an ancient detective novelist, and now he's about to cultivate a food columnist. With these moves, Luo Chong is practically trying to single-handedly max out the Han tribe's cultural index. Zhan Ying, I was just looking for something to do, and my husband wants me to become the founding matriarch of gourmet cuisine. The 4th section will be called Housewife's Little Tips. Luo Chong grew more animated as he spoke. For example, when rendering lard, add a little water to the pot to ensure it won't burn. Blanch green beans before stir-frying, and they'll come out a vibrant green, whetting the appetite at a single glance. At these words, the eyes of both Xiao Dai and Zhan Ying lit up. A cookbook. Wow, what a brilliant idea. Zhan Ying clapped her hands, her face blooming with delight. I'm good at this. I never knew cooking could be turned into a book. I'll start writing today. My husband, you have to help me review it when I'm done. No problem. You write the draft, and I guarantee I'll polish it until it shines. Luo Chong declared with a grand wave of his hand, then lowered his head to continue reading the investigator's journal. But he hadn't even read 2 lines. Husband, what about me? What should I write? Xiao Dai grew anxious, tugging at his sleeve. I know how to weave and dye cloth, but how do you write about that? You can't just draw a loom on paper. Luo Chong had no choice but to once again reluctantly put down his novel, pinching the bridge of his nose as he thought for a moment. Technical subjects are indeed difficult to write about, he mused, but it's not impossible. How about this? Change your approach. Don't write about the technique. Write about the history. History, yes. You'll write the saga of textiles in the Han tribe. Start from the very beginning, with hand-twisting hemp rope, and move on to mechanical spinning and weaving. From monochrome homespun cloth to the current open work and batik printing. Cotton, hemp, wool, silk. Chronicle the evolution of all these fabrics. But won't it be a bit dry with just history? Then we'll add some spice. Luo Chong snapped his fingers. You'll write another book, a fashion and style guide. Teach everyone how to measure for clothes, how to cut and sew. Include all kinds of patterns, all kinds of stitches. Zhan Ying will teach the people how to eat, and you will teach them how to dress. Food and clothing are 2 of the 4 necessities of life. You too will cover half of them. Think of the importance of that. Xiao Dai's eyes shone with a brilliant light. It was a moment of epiphany. That's right. Sister Tang Yao was making such a huge contribution to medicine, and Zhan Ying was about to become a goddess of food. As the eldest sister, She couldn't fall behind. My husband, you're a genius. She grabbed Luo Chong's hand as if it were a lifeline. It's a promise, then. When I need to draw diagrams, you have to help. Your drawings are the best. No problem. This winter, as long as the sky doesn't fall, I'm at your service. Luo Chong promised, patting his chest. After finally placating his two aspiring author wives, Luo Chong could at last settle down and continue reading his detective novel. This manuscript was an absolute treasure. It could be promoted within the government and used as a textbook. Of course, it still needed some work, some additions. This was a textbook. It had to be rigorous. With this in mind, Luo Chong immediately summoned an imperial guard. Relay my orders. Have all the chief criminal investigators from the 8 commanderies of Hanyang gather in Hanyang City immediately. They must arrive within 2 days. Yes. 2 days later, the atmosphere in the conference room of the Hanyang City government building was solemn. More than 20 master detectives from various regions sat upright, their gazes fixed on Luo Chong at the head of the table. You all know about the call for submissions I issued half a month ago, right? Luo Chong began coolly. Everyone nodded in unison, though their minds were racing with confusion. What does summoning us here have to do with the writing contest? Luo Chong then slapped a thick manuscript onto the table with a loud thwack. This contest has produced something good, he said, his eyes sweeping over the men. A chief investigator from Tuahai Commandery wrote an investigator's journal. The content is good, and it has great potential for widespread use. But I feel it's not yet complete. That's why I've called all you professionals here to study and discuss it together, to build upon it and make it better. Hearing this, a collective pang of regret shot through the men in the room. They hadn't taken that call for submissions seriously at all. Who would have thought that this kind of thing could be turned into a book and even catch the chieftain's eye? And now, a colleague from the south had beaten them to it. All they could do was follow along and contribute, without even getting their names on the cover. Sigh. Regrets were regrets, but the task still had to be done. The men spent a full day circulating the journal and reviewing the supplementary guidelines Luo Chong had laid out. The next day, the brainstorming officially began. Now, with a chance to shine in front of the chieftain, no one held anything back. In an instant, the conference room buzzed with passionate debate as bizarre cases and unique interrogation techniques were brought forth one after another. After a full day, they had finally compiled a complete theoretical system. Case analysis, clue seeking, evidence gathering, and interrogation without torture. The point about no torture was especially emphasized. Torture was a crude method, a last resort. A true master of interrogation could pry open a criminal's mouth with ironclad evidence alone. Finally, technical content such as crime scene analysis and autopsies were also added. Speaking of autopsies, everyone realized that most of the homicide cases in the Han tribe occurred in regions with diverse populations and recent educational development. To put it bluntly, they were undereducated, especially in the popularization of the laws of Han. Legal education. This must be put on the agenda immediately, Luo Chong made a mental note. After another day of intense discussion, this textbook, a collection of the highest criminal investigation wisdom in the Han tribe, was finally finalized. Luo Chong personally named it Criminal Investigation Techniques, and he designated it as an internal publication, strictly forbidden from being circulated externally. Why? He was afraid the common people would learn from it and commit high IQ crimes. If a few geniuses popped up who learned counter-surveillance techniques, it would be a huge headache for the authorities. It was a necessary precaution. Narrators aside, a simple writing contest has been forcibly turned into the Han tribe's first specialized monograph writing competition by Luo Chong. First came the marine biologist, the gourmet, and the fashion designer, and now a supergroup of criminal investigation experts. If this keeps up, he'll probably manage to produce a volume on the postnatal care of sows. Luo Chong, I'm not governing a tribe. I'm producing knowledge. Knowledge is power, and even more so, it is the power to rule. Of course, this was only a temporary solution. The fundamental security of society still depended on the popularization of the law. A Damoclean sword named the laws of Han had to hang over the hearts of the common people, ensuring they understood the severe consequences of breaking the law. After all, who would be willing to gamble with their life if another path was available? Thus, after determining the scope of use for criminal investigation techniques, Luo Chong issued another internal notice. All commanderies and counties were to immediately strengthen legal education. They could collaborate with schools and let the children act as legal education ambassadors for their parents at home. With another book taken care of, Luo Chong once again dove into the mountain of paper in his study. As time went on, more and more manuscripts arrived from all over. He had to spend a large portion of every day acting as a long-suffering editor. Within this mountain of paper, letters formed the vast majority. It couldn't be helped. The literacy rate being what it was, many people had no idea what writing a book even entailed. But seeing others do it, they joined in the fun. All they knew was that whatever they wrote, the chieftain would read it. So why go through all that trouble? Why not just write a letter and chat with the chieftain? It was simple and saved paper. These letters were a motley collection. Some were full of gratitude, others were full of complaints, leaving Luo Chong unsure whether to laugh or cry. However, some of these letters contained genuinely valuable information. For example, a herdsman from Zhongwu Commandery wrote a letter to petition the government. He said that he raised a type of goat whose wool was as white and fine as the clouds in the sky. But the local officials insisted that the tribe did not encourage raising goats, and only those who raised sheep could receive the winter fodder subsidy. He felt this was unfair and had come to the chieftain for a fair judgment. This matter had indeed been ordered by Luo Chong. Goats were notorious grassland destroyers, eating grass down to the roots and even gnawing on tree bark when desperate. Large-scale grazing was tantamount to giving the grasslands a desertification treatment. Sheep were different. They only ate the grass on the surface and fertilized as they grazed, making them the little guardians of grassland conservation. In addition, sheep produced both wool and milk, their economic value far surpassing that of goats, which was why Luo Chong had ordered their promotion. But then again, goats were not entirely useless. The Han tribe's officially designated writing tool, the brush pen, required goat hair for its production, and the demand was immense. So, goats still had to be raised, in enclosures, and fed with fodder. Luo Chong immediately picked up his pen and wrote a reply, attaching his own directive: have the local officials investigate the goat breed mentioned in the letter. If it was truly that excellent, it should be handed over to the Department of Agriculture for scientific research and breeding. He placed the reply and the original letter together to be sent back in due course. In this way, he reviewed the manuscripts region by region. After finishing with one area, he would immediately send the entire batch back the way it came. When he encountered authors with potential but who didn't know how to write, he would personally offer guidance, providing templates and formats and encouraging them to continue their work. As for those who were just writing for fun, he would scrawl a simple reply in large strokes. Read: thank you for your letter. By the end of the 11th month, Bai Qi came to report with the final drafts of a study of the sea and the young man and the sea. After Luo Chong checked them and found no errors, he immediately ordered, print 1,000 copies of each. Across the entire Han tribe, with its dozens of commanderies and hundreds of villages, 1,000 copies spread out would mean only about 10 per county town. It wasn't much. They would test the market first. If sales were good, they would print more. While Luo Chong was busy building the Han tribe, brick by brick, Chu Bing, far away in the north, had run into a bit of trouble. The 1st Battalion, which he personally commanded, was stretched thin. In the 11th month, due to the Shin's guards' frantic hunting, all the cannibal villages had run out of food. The starving elderly, weak, and women had no choice but to venture out themselves, flocking to the river bend guarded by the 3rd Battalion, hoping to catch fish to survive. Their numbers grew, and they even spontaneously organized guard details, putting the 3rd Battalion in a difficult position. If they attacked, they would expose their position and the enemy would scatter, wasting all their previous arrangements. If they didn't attack, they had to watch the enemy loitering right under their noses. In the end, they had no choice but to withdraw, preserving their element of surprise for a future plan. At the same time, the 1st Battalion had also run into a tough nut to crack. The enemy had gotten smarter and had actually started to band together. Several thousand of them, interspersed with giant apes, had formed a massive hunting group. This juicy piece of meat was dangling right in front of him, but with the 1st Battalion's strength alone, he couldn't possibly take a bite. Let them go? Chu Bing was unwilling to accept that. For a moment, he was so troubled he was scratching his head. Wait, let me think for a moment. Yi interrupted Chu Bing, moving to the map by himself, his brow tightly furrowed. He quickly grasped the situation. The harder the 1st Battalion fought, the greater the pressure on the 3rd Battalion. Now, both sides were facing the same problem. Too many enemies, too few soldiers. Annihilating them was not a problem. Capturing them alive was harder than ascending to heaven. At this point, a choice had to be made. He looked up at Chu Bing. What about the 2nd Battalion? Are you suggesting we pull them from their post as well? Yes. Chu Bing's finger jabbed at the map. The 2nd Battalion is guarding the salt pond, but the enemy has been beaten into submission and no longer dares to present themselves for slaughter. Keeping the 2nd Battalion there now is a complete waste of manpower. We can abandon the salt pond for now and transfer the 2nd and 3rd battalions, along with all the militia, over here. We will concentrate all our forces and devour this largest enemy group in the hunting grounds in one bite. Hearing this, Yu Yi immediately began to calculate in his mind. 2,500 from the Shinsguard, 1,000 from the hunting grounds militia, 1,000 from the salt pond, and another 2,000 from the river valley camp. By that calculation, we can muster 6,500 men. 6,500 against 4,500. Total annihilation is no problem. The key is, how many can we capture alive? After doing the math, he raised a new concern. But if we abandon the salt pond and the enemy comes back to occupy it, won't all our previous efforts have been in vain? Chu Bing smiled at his words. Narrators aside, the northern campaign of the large-scale real-time strategy game Rise of the Han Tribe has reached a critical juncture. Player Chu Bing is facing a shortage of troops for a two-front war. After careful consideration, he decides to go all in, abandon the secondary base, gather all forces, and engage in a decisive battle with the enemy's main force. This move will either result in a complete wipe of the enemy's high ground or a GG. Yu Yi, wait, let me do the math again. Our hero units are high-level and well-equipped. I think we can take this fight. He looked at Yu Yi, a cryptic smile on his lips. No, uncle. It wasn't a waste at all. A temporary retreat is for the sake of a greater prize. After fighting these past 2 months, I've realized that our initial deployment at the salt pond was a strategic error. Oh, how so? Yu Yi's curiosity was piqued. Think about it, Chu Bing said, holding up one finger. We occupy the salt pond, the enemy attacks, finds they can't win, and stops coming. But our soldiers are still standing guard. If the enemy doesn't come, isn't that a waste of manpower? He held up a second finger. But what if we take the salt pond, and then we leave? What do you think the enemy will do? Is that even a question? Yu Yi shot back without a second thought. The enemy would fight tooth and nail to take it back. They'd probably even post a heavy guard. Chu Bing clapped his hands sharply. Exactly. That's precisely the effect I'm after. If we can take the salt pond once, we can take it a second and a third time. People can't live without salt. They can't just conjure it out of thin air. As long as that salt pond is there, they will have to walk obediently into our trap. His eyes gleamed with excitement. This way, we can use the salt pond to fight a never-ending war of attrition with them. We'll attack, devour a wave of enemies, and then just walk away. The enemy will see an empty prize and rush to occupy it. The moment their men arrive, we'll hit them with a surprise counterattack and devour another wave. We'll repeat this over and over. I'd like to see just how many able-bodied men they have to throw at us. Yu Ye's eyes lit up, and he slapped his thigh. Of course. Why didn't I think of that? We've been far too rigid in our thinking. The move was vicious. The salt pond was a strategic point of contention, a blatant trap laid out in the open. The enemy would know it was a pit, but they'd have no choice but to hold their noses and jump right in. That's right. The more Yu Yi thought about it, the more excited he became. A bottomless pit. That's the perfect term for it. We'll use this bottomless pit and see just how many men they have to fill it. When they can't fill it anymore, that's when we launch our final assault. Precisely my intention. All right then, do we move the troops now? Yu Yi was restless. Should we report this to the chieftain? A report must be made, but there's no rush. Speed is paramount in war. Let's get moving first. We can explain it to the chieftain in a couple of days. He'll understand. All right, let's do it. Give the order. The order was issued, and the entire northern defensive line moved in an instant. The 2nd and 3rd battalions immediately struck their camps and, along with their militia and supplies, began a forced march toward the 1st Battalion's position in the hunting grounds. However, a new scouting report threw a bucket of cold water on Chu Bing's plans. The valley the enemy occupied was extremely narrow, easy to defend, and difficult to attack. To encircle and annihilate them, they would have to split their forces, cross the mountains, and attack from the rear. But the mountains were now sealed by heavy snow. Crossing them was tantamount to gambling with the lives of his soldiers. What was worse, no one knew when the herds would migrate south. What if the herds suddenly stampeded out from their rear while the two armies were locked in combat? The image was too horrific to contemplate. Thousands of wolf-like cannibals in the front, and tens of thousands of stampeding beasts from behind. Forget rifles. Even with a machine gun, you'd be trampled into paste. Now, Chu Bing was worried again. I have a suggestion, the veteran general, Yu Yi, said at the critical moment. Uncle Yu, please speak quickly. Think about it, Yu Yi said, pointing at the map. Our objective is to eliminate those few thousand able-bodied cannibals, right? Yes, Chu Bing nodded like a pecking chicken. Well then, our target is the men, not the beasts. Why must we fight them to the death in that valley? We can simply wait for them to finish their hunt and prepare a big surprise for them on their way home. A sly, knowing smile touched the corners of Yu Ye's mouth. Imagine, after their hunt, they'll be burdened with all their game. That meat is heavy and cumbersome. They won't be able to move quickly. At that point, we choose the battlefield. We set the time. Even better, if they have too much game and have to transport it in batches, won't their forces be divided? Won't our advantage be even greater? Chu Bing slapped his own forehead. Of course. What a brilliant idea. Absolutely perfect. Uncle Yu, this move of yours, it's like that old story, waiting by the stump for the rabbit. It's a stroke of genius.